Okay, everyone. I want to welcome all of you to what really will be an incredible event. It's not often that you can go to an event and feel like you're touching history. The story you're going to hear tonight is simply an incredible story. The Schanzer brothers, who you'll meet, they were actually here 6 years ago. But I thought it was important, a whole new generation of students, to bring them back again, and we can wish them happy birthday. They just celebrated their 90th birthday. At a time when it's very hard to find Holocaust survivors, to have the story they're going to tell you, and two twins who can tell this amazing story, we're very thrilled and really feel honored, and that the Hebrew word is zocha, that you are able to join us tonight. And I also want to say that I don't know how many years it's been, they've been giving this presentation, but they do it just to spread the word, to let people know what happened. They even told me they don't want any honorarium. Instead, they told me a charity to donate it to. They both come from New Jersey. They came in today. So without any further ado, I'm going to call on Bernard and Henry Schanzer to present their story. They'll speak for about 50 minutes, 45, 50 minutes, and then we'll have some time for questions. So take it away.
By the way, for about 45 minutes, I was the only one, till somebody pushed me out of the uterus. But thank you, Dr. Shapiro, for inviting us to speak again at the University of Scranton. And we are honored to be here. And we do appreciate your presence and being here, and we have a strong feeling of kinship in sharing our story. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the liberation of a death camp, Auschwitz, where over 1 million Jews were murdered. With the rise of anti-Semitism, we feel an urgency to share our story. Our story is a story of terror and survival, told from a child's perspective. My brother and I were 7 years old when we were first impacted by the Shoah, the Holocaust. We testify as to a crime that was committed against our family and against humanity, but it was primarily a crime against the Jews. The intent of the Nazis' final solution was to kill every Jew, irrespective of age, gender, religious affiliation, or social status. On August 26, 1942, our father, Bruno Schanzer, was caught in a roundup of Jews in Saint Etienne, France. From there, he was taken to a transit camp in Venisieux, near Lyon. From there, he was sent to a detention camp in Drancy, outside of Paris, and from there to an extermination camp. As documented by Klarsfeld, our father was on convoy 27. These convoys consisted of cattle cars. In the cattle cars, there was a pail for human refuse. Convoy 27 left Drancy on September the 2nd, 1942, for Auschwitz. On that convoy, there were 1,016 people. At liberation in 1945, 30 had survived. What I find heart-wrenching is on the list of the segment of my father, you will see there are two names, Henri and Elise Ulezalka, who were 5 and 9. They were alone without parents. They were destined to be murdered. Henry and I could have been on that list. From France, 75,721 Jews, including 11,000 children, were deported during the Holocaust. At the end of the war, 2,566 survived. How did we survive? My brother I, my sister, and cousins survived. We were hidden children. We owe our survival to righteous Gentiles and our resourceful mother. These righteous Gentiles were Jeanne Bonhomme, whom we called Tatan Jeannot or Aunt Jane, a mother, Adolphine Dorel, whom we called Mémé or Grandma, and the Marquis and the Marquise of Virieu. Our story is not complete if we do not remember them and if we do not praise them.
To put our story in perspective, note that our mother, Bella, was born in Poland, that's Eastern Europe, and our father Bruno was born in Czechoslovakia. Our parents immigrated to Belgium in the late 1920s, where they met. They were married in 1932, and we show you a copy of their marriage certificate to establish our legitimacy. My sister Anna was born in 1934, and my twin brother and I were born March 13th, 1935. And as Dr. Shapiro just told you, we've just celebrated our 90th birthday. We lived in Liège, Belgium. This is a photo taken of our family in 1936 when we are about 1 year old, and the next photo of the 3 children taken in late 1939. On these pictures, we don't know which one is me and which one is my brother, but without doubt, the better looking one is me. I show you these pictures so that you can see that by our own admission, the 2 old men before you were once very, very cute, and you can understand why our mother loved us. But more importantly, we show these pictures to underscore the cruelty and inhumanity of the Nazis and their helpers who murdered 1.5 million such innocent and angelic children. Our ordeal began when the Germans invaded Belgium May 10, 1940, and this is a banner headline of the New York Times of that day. Within a few days, 13 members of our extended family crammed into a small van, and we fled ahead of the advancing Germans towards France. My first experience with the horrors of war occurred as we were reaching the French border. German planes began to strafe our convoy and the town we were approaching. Those of us who were able to do so jumped out of the van and took cover on the side of the road. As the planes flew by, we could see cars, buildings, and people being blown up into the air. After the bombing, we continued our travels to south of France and ended up in the city of Saint Etienne, which you can follow on the yellow line on the map. Upon arriving in Saint Etienne, the refugees had to register with the municipal authorities. Of significance is that the registration form reported their address, and in the case of the Jews, their religion. Juif or Juive,
it's encircled,
was stamped on the registration form, as you can see on the display. The unfortunate consequence of the registration and stamping is that it turned out to be a trap. 2 years later, in 1942, the French police knew where the Jewish immigrants lived and were able to round them up and then hand them over to the Germans. Oblivious to their shame and role that they played, the French authorities updated these documents during and after the war. We show you the obverse side of these two registration forms, and on the left of the screen, you can see the note arrested, that's with respect to my father, arrested August 1942 as a Jew. That was his crime. With respect to my mother, you can see the mark wanted, left 1942. As we will tell you, my mother managed to escape and go into hiding. Now going back to our coming to Saint Etienne on August 17th, 1940. From the August and summer of 1940 until the summer of 1942, I have no recollection of our children's world being significantly threatened. We even managed to go on a family vacation in the summer of 41 to the French countryside, and we were then 6 years old, and look at the photo of the happy family and the photo of the 3 smiling children. But I want you to focus on the picture and note and see who grabbed the long-sleeved shirt, the good belt, and the sandals, and left me with the short-sleeved shirt, the lousy belt, and the holy sneakers.
Life is tough.
As to our family's involvement in things Jewish, I will tell you one story. Shortly after we settled in Saint Etienne, our parents hired a Hebrew teacher to try to teach us some Hebrew. However, we took an instant dislike to him, and as he was leaving our apartment building, we went out on a balcony overlooking the street and pelted him with wet paper towels. That was the end of our Hebrew lessons. But our father, who was a very strict disciplinarian, administered a different lesson to our little behinds. It turns out that last September, we went back to visit the city of Saint Etienne, and lo and behold, the famous balcony is still there. But that is an aside. Unfortunately, any degree of normalcy came to an abrupt end in the summer of 1942. Saint Etienne was in Vichy France, and although Vichy France was not under immediate German control, the French government and police participated actively, willingly, and intensely in the arrest and deportation of Jews. In mid-July of 1942, my parents had sent Bernie and me to a summer camp. We came home from camp in early August to find the atmosphere tense and supercharged. There was a palpable sense of gloom and doom. As it turns out, there had been a roundup of around 10,000 Jews in Paris on July 16 and 17, 1942, and this must have sent shockwaves in the Jewish community. Years later, we learned from our mother that many stories were circulating about German atrocities. Our father, who had been educated in Germany, did not believe that the so-called civilized Germans could possibly behave in the manner being reported. Our mother, who had been raised in Poland and subjected to virulent anti-Semitism from her earliest days, feared the worst. Unfortunately, our parents and the other members of our extended family had no other place to go and stayed in Saint Etienne.
In mid-August 1942, a few days after our return from summer camp, our parents told us that they would be sending us to board with a Gentile acquaintance of my father's. Our sister Anna and her cousin Annie would be going to a boarding school in Lyon. Etched in my memory is that hot summer day where Papa was carrying our suitcases and we were holding on to him and to the suitcases, trying to be big boys. We got to the bus stop and Papa reminded us to be on our best behavior and to act like big boys. Then he took each one of us on a knee and he held us and he hugged us. Then suddenly everything started shaking. Our father was shaking. Henry and I were shaken. Our father was sobbing. Our father had never shown much emotion, especially in public. Here he was, obviously crying. The bus pulled up. He rapidly composed himself and helped us get on the bus. Our father was 39 years old. We were 7.5. We would never see him again, and he would never see us again. After a short ride, we arrived at our destination. Neither Henry or I can remember the name of the people. We've dubbed them Monsieur et Madame Chrétien. After we had been with the Chrétiens for a few days, my mother came to visit. And this must have been on August 26, 1942. And it was a delightful day. We spent the day with Mama, and we didn't want the day to end. However, when it was time to go, we accompanied our mother to the bus stop. There was a gendarme, a French policeman, going from person to person, checking their papers. When he came to my mother's papers, he told her, Madame Schanzer, you are wanted by the police in Saint Etienne. You are under arrest. Our mother told the policeman, I didn't do anything wrong. This is a gross misunderstanding. The moment I get to Saint Etienne, I will go directly to the police, straighten the matter out. You do not need to accompany me. My mother was a very strong believer in the power of the purse, and there was an appropriate exchange of money, so that the policeman let her get on the bus by herself. Needless to say that our quick-witted mother did not surrender herself into the hands of the police. Instead of getting off at the terminal in Saint-Etienne, she got off a few stops before. She went to our apartment, and that our apartment had already been seized and locked. On that fateful day, August 26, 1942, she learned that all the members of our family who were in Saint-Etienne had been arrested. This included my father, Bruno, his brother, Max Schanzer, our uncle, Boris Hein, and our cousin, Jack, 7.5 years old, and his parents, Boris and Frida Shapiro. They were initially taken to Venisieux, a camp in Venisieux near Lyon. There, my cousin Jack remembers my father giving him a piggyback ride. Now, at that time, there was, and for a transient moment, there was a law in France that if you were an abandoned child or if you were an orphan, you were a ward of the state and could not be handed over to the Germans. Jewish organizations and Christian organizations under the aegis of Cardinal Gerlier, the Cardinal of Lyon, urged parents to sign documents of abandonment of their children so that the children could be saved. My uncle, Boris Shapiro, signed a paper of abandonment of his son, Jack. He and 108 children were whisked out of Venisieux and transmitted to French families and were saved. After we had left our mother at the bus depot, we came back to the family of the Chrétiens, and we told them what had happened to our mother at the bus stop. The Chrétiens, whose initial welcome of us had been cordial, if not warm, became cool and distant. We later learned that Monsieur Chrétien went to see Dr. Fargier. Dr. Fargier was our family doctor, and he was the one in charge of disbursing funds for our care. In view of the increased danger, Monsieur Chrétien wanted to have more money to care for us. Dr. Fargier said he would be glad to give him more money, but he needed the permission of the Schanzers. At this point, my father had been deported, and our mother had gone into hiding. The Chrétiens were very unhappy. Some days later, Monsieur Chrétien told us to pack our bags. We were going on a trip. We trudge along with our bags in hand, and we get to the bus stop, and we see on the bus, destination, Saint-Etienne. And we think, fantastic, we're going to be reunited with our mother, with our father, with our sister. When we arrive in Saint-Etienne, Monsieur Chrétien marshals us off from the bus stop, and he brings us to a police station. In the police station, he hands us over to the police, and as he turns to leave, he tells us, here, they will take very good care of you. In the police station, like little criminals, we were questioned and quizzed about our mother's whereabouts and about her friends. Fortunately, we knew nothing. After the interrogation, a policeman told us that they would be taking us and placing us in an orphanage. In some, they were holding us as hostages till my mother would turn herself in.
So we were brought to the orphanage, which was a Catholic orphanage run by kindly nuns who promised us if we were good, we could become priests. We never made it. The orphanage was across the street from a church to which we marched daily and twice on Sundays for prayers. We had been in the orphanage for about 2 months when we experienced what Bruno likes to call the Great Escape. One morning, as we were walking from the orphanage to the church, 2 men approached us and said, "We have a message from your mother. Tomorrow, be at the back of the line." The mention of our mother must have done the trick. I have no recollection of questioning the message or the messenger. The next morning, we made sure to be at the back of the line. As we crossed the street from the orphanage to the church, the 2 men from the day before came over to us, took our hands, and calmly walked away with us. You would have expected to hear somebody yell for us to come back, but there was no outcry. Somehow, we just walked away. It turns out the 2 men had acted in response to a request from our mother. They were members of Lozé, a semi-clandestine organization that was still working in France at that time and was helping save Jewish children. To this day, we don't know how my mother had learned where we were and how our escape was so well engineered. The 2 men took us for a short train ride and placed us on a farm. However, the farmer did not treat us well. We were malnourished and became very, very sick. We were on this farm a few months when someone from Lozé came, saw our emaciated condition, and proceeded to remove us from this farm, and they placed us in an orphanage in Grenoble, which is in the French Alps. However, Lozé refused to disclose our new location to my mother, as Lozé was worried she either might come to visit us and or give us away in the event that she was captured and tortured. Now let me take you back to what happened to my mother after August 26, 1942, after she narrowly escaped. She initially went into hiding with a family named Paré who were working with the French resistance. Unfortunately, the Parés were betrayed by their own son, and my mother barely escaped getting caught when she came on the scene as the Parés were being arrested. She then hid in a convent, but had to leave when the convent was going to be searched by the Germans. After having to leave the convent in the spring of 43, my mother was walking the streets of Saint Etienne with no safe place to go. She was at her wit's end. As she was walking, my mother miraculously ran into Madame Jeanne Bonhomme, who owned a dress shop in Saint Etienne. My mother had bought clothing from Madame Bonhomme in the previous 2 years, and they had formed a very warm relationship. When Madame Bonhomme saw my mother, who must have looked a wreck, she asked my mother how come she looked so down and out. At the end of a rope, my mother told Madame Bonhomme all her troubles. Without a moment's hesitation, Madame Bonhomme courageously offered to help my mother. With total disregard for her own welfare, Madame Bonhomme came to the rescue. Madame Bonhomme managed to get my mother a false identity card and a false birth certificate. My mother, who was born in Grajewo, Poland, now became Marie l'Héritier, born in the town of Beaumont, Haute-Loire, as attested to by her grandfather, François l'Héritier. Pause for an instant and consider the false documents we've just shown you and which Madame Bonhomme engineered to get for my mother. Bear in mind that Madame Bonhomme had to cajole or bribe a government official to get these documents. If Madame Bonhomme had been betrayed, this might have cost her her life, as well as the life of the official who subscribed to the documents. My mother was then further taken under Madame Bonhomme's wing, and Madame Bonhomme arranged to have my mother go to work in a historic castle for the Marquis and Marquise de Virieu, who worked for the French resistance. Shortly after my mother got to the castle, the Marquis arranged to have my sister Anna and my cousin Annie brought to live in the castle, as the boarding school where they had been placed was being requisitioned by the Germans, and it was no longer safe for the girls. Of greater significance to Bernie and me is that at my mother's urging, Madame Bonhomme negotiated with Lozé to learn where we were. She came to get us in the orphanage in Grenoble, and in the late spring of 1943, she placed us on her mother's farm in the town of Saint-Paul-de-Mont. Within days, we forged a strong and affectionate bond with her mother, Madame Dorel, whom we called Mémé Grandma.
So this became our fifth refuge. How to describe La Mémé? She was a 65-year-old young woman who was wise and worldly. She had a meager little farm in Saint-Paul-de-Mont village, a village in the isolated countryside. There were a few goats, a few sheep, and one cow. There was no indoor plumbing. We became little farmers and gardeners. And you can see the two of us, and between us there's a goat, and we eventually learned to milk the goats. There's a little boy there, Henri Passeron, was La Mémé's grandson, who you'll meet again later. And you see us in our gray smocks and our sabots, our wooden shoes. We blended in. At night, when using the outhouse, Henry and I would hold hands, and we would overcome all our fears. For our cover, Mémé told everyone that we're the sons of one of her daughters who had married a Protestant. This was an excellent cover because it explained why we're not familiar with the church service when we went to church, and therefore could not become choir boys, and further, why we went to public school, whereas almost everyone else went to Catholic school. There are many wonderful stories to share about La Mémé and how we became little farmers. However, there are two stories that I wish to and feel compelled to share with you. From the time we had left our home, Henry and I would cover our heads and we would say a Hebrew prayer. We would say, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Va'ed. We would say it once, we would say it twice, we would say it till we fell asleep. After we had been with La Mémé for a couple of weeks, one morning, he told us, what are you boys doing at night? I hear you mumbling. We decided to take her into our confidence, and we told her, Mémé, we are saying a prayer. She said, what does it mean? And we said, on ne sait pas, we don't know. But this amazing woman said, why don't you teach it to me, and we will all say it together. You can imagine the next scene when you have two little Jewish boys tugging at La Mémé and telling Mémé, Mémé, répétez, Mémé, répétez. We also went to and attended the public school, which was a one-room schoolhouse, and on most days, there were at best 10 kids in the class. There were Henry and I, the two Jewish Protestants. There was also another Jewish boy whose family was hiding in the area. We had a very good teacher, Madame Rochigneux, but she insisted on absolute decorum. And one of us who will eventually become a lawyer would also occasionally talk back. On an occasion, Madame Rochigneux called Henry to her desk, and she gave him a slap that I thought his head would roll off. When we came back to that afternoon, we told La Mémé what had happened. The next day, Mémé came to school with the two of us, and she told Madame Rochigneux, on ne touche pas mes enfants. One does not touch my children. We had a guardian and a protector. While we were with La Mémé, there were times at night when we would go to bed hungry. If we went to bed hungry, so did she. Whatever she had, she shared with us. And to our children and grandchildren who've heard our story, she's very much La Mémé grandma.
After we had been with La Mémé for about 4 months, she told us that Madame Bonan, her daughter, was going to be taking us to the castle where our mother was hidden. For a week, we were literally floating on the air as we looked forward to be reunited with our mother, whom we had not seen in a year. Although traveling involved substantial risk, Madame Bonhomme came to the farm, gave us our first bath in a month, and brought us nice and clean to the castle. I recall arriving at the castle in late morning and hugging my mother and sister. You can imagine the joyous reunion. We had not seen our mother in a year. We were given a grand tour of the castle. It was an incredible sight. We even had a photo op. We had just started lunch when we were alerted that the marquis had been denounced and that as the police were on their way to the castle. The marquis arranged for our family to be taken immediately to a nearby farm where we were hidden in a hayloft. We spent the evening and night in the hayloft, terrified of the bats flying around and of the threat of being discovered. The marquis, having been alerted, escaped. with his family. But significantly, he managed to send a messenger to Madame Bonhomme to inform her of what had happened. She arrived at our hiding place the next day and arranged for Bernie and me to be sent back to her mother's farm. We had been with our mother for less than 24 hours. At that time, Madame Bonhomme took my sister and our cousin to live in the back of her dress shop in Saint Etienne. Madame Bonhomme fabricated a cover that the two girls were her nieces, whose fathers were prisoners of war and whose mothers had gone off to get work. Ironically, the dress shop was across the street from a Gestapo office building. As for my mother, she had to find a new hiding place. But armed with a false birth certificate and false identity card, she managed to find places to work and to survive several close calls. After our return to La Mémé's farm, there was a frightful episode at the end of 1943. The family of the other Jewish child in our school was denounced to the authorities and arrested by the Germans. The arrest took place while we were in school. Our teacher, Madame Rochigneux, the one who had so nicely hit me, but who must have known that we were Jewish, directed us with great emphasis to go home immediately and to stop nowhere until we got to La Mémé's farm. As we were going down the road, La Mémé, who had been alerted, was running towards us crying and obviously frightened. She explained that there was a problem and that we would be camping out with her in the woods that night. So we spent the night camping in the woods. In the morning, the Germans had left the town and we returned to the farm. Bernie and I continued to live with La Mémé until August 1945, when we were finally reunited with our mother, whom we had not seen in over 2 years.
VE Day in Europe was on May the 8th, 1945. However, we were not reunited with our mother till the mid-summer of 1945. I have a letter that I had sent to my mother for Mother's Day on June the 1st, 1945, wishing her a happy Mother's Day and hoping that our father would soon return. Our sister, Anna, who had been hidden by Tatan Chanon, had been thoroughly rehearsed with the knowledge that her father was a prisoner of war, had come to believe the story totally. And as French prisoners of war were coming back from camps and from the front, our sister Anna would go every day to the railroad depot and wait for our father. He never returned. Our mother found our cousin Jack, whose parents, Boris and Frida Shapiro, had been murdered, and he came to live with us. He had been physically and emotionally traumatized with the war. With the aid of our Uncle Max Ein, my mother's brother, who had come into the United States in 1941, we obtained visas. We arrived in the United States on April the 13th, 1946, and we settled on the Lower East Side of New York City. My mother was a 45-year-old widow in charge of 4 children. She worked very hard to provide for her family, overcoming many challenges. She never looked back. She instilled in us the importance of education and tradition. We went to high school, then City College. Henry received engineering degrees, then went to law school. I went to medical school. In 66 through 68, during the Vietnamese War, I served for 2 years in the United States Air Force as a captain in the medical corps. When Henry was sworn in at the New York State Bar in 67, I came in my uniform to make it official. Our sister Anna went to Hunter College and became a French teacher. In 1980, Anna petitioned Yad Vashem, which is the Israeli government official memorial to the Holocaust, to award Madame Bonhomme and her mother, Adolphine Dorel, posthumously the Medal of Righteous among the Nations. The medal quotes a saying from the Talmud, "He who saves one life saves a whole world." Jeanne Bonhomme and Adolphine Dorel were found to be worthy of the honor. Jeanne Bonhomme, accompanied by her grandniece, Nadine Passeron, came from France. On July 24, 1980, there was an inspiring and memorable ceremony at the Israeli consulate in New York City. It was a glorious moment for Tatan Jeannot and for the children and the worlds that she had saved. At the ceremony, Tatan Jeannot was amazed at the fuss which was made over what she had done. She stated that she had done nothing exceptional, nothing extraordinary, only what was right and expected from a human being. The following year, a tree was planted in the memory of Adolphine Dorel, La Mémé, and of Tatan Jeannot, and that tree is growing. Any of you who go to Jerusalem, you go to Yad Vashem, visit that tree. The story of the award given to Jeanne Bonhomme and her mother was reported in the press, including the Jewish Floridian. The story had an exhilarating and astounding ripple effect.
So the story of the award was read by Siegfried Gutter, an 86-year-old man living in North Miami Beach who was a survivor of Auschwitz, where his first wife had been murdered. When Siegfried read the story about the Schanzers, he recognized the family connection, and he wrote a letter to the Israeli consul seeking to contact us. The Israeli consul contacted us, and we set up a phone call with Siegfried. After exchanging hellos, he asked us, "Was your grandmother's name Charlotte?" Indeed, it was. And you can imagine the audible gasp in his voice when we told him so. He was exultant. We could hear him crying and laughing at the same time. Siegfried then wrote a second letter to the Israeli consul, thanking the consul for completing the connection. In Ziggy's words, some of which I will abstract, he says, "Mrs. Steinberg, that's our sister, and her brothers contacted me by phone, and we had a very exciting four-way conversation. They are, in fact, my deceased sister's grandchildren. So after so many years, I had the pleasure to discover some blood relatives when I thought I was the only survivor of my family. As a thank you, my wife pledges to work even harder for the cause of our spiritual homeland, Medinat Israel." Needless to say, we immediately arranged to go with our then entire family to Florida to visit with Siegfried and his second wife, Gisela, who also had survived 3 years in Auschwitz. Seeing us and getting together brought him great pleasure and happiness. To appreciate the significance to Ziggy of knowing that there were vibrant shoots, note the Gutter family tree he drew for us the first time we met. But consider the tragedy this represents for him and for us. Wilhelm and Samuel and their entire family murdered. Charlotte, our grandmother, murdered. Our father, Bruno, murdered. His brother, Max, murdered. Helen and her family, and Henrietta and her family, the entire family murdered. Siegfried, the sole survivor. Oscar, Fanny, and Moritz, and their entire family murdered. The depravity of the so-called humans who caused this to happen is beyond comprehension. As to the vibrant shoots, look at a photo of our family, the descendants of Bruno and Bella. We have titled the photo "The Revenge," to declare that the attempt by the Nazis to destroy the Jewish people has not succeeded. Look at the happy family event and the promise and the hope for the future it represents. Our family has risen from the ashes, and the spirit of our ancestors lives on.
In 2015, 5 years after we had started telling our story, we realized that the Marquis and the Marquise de Virieu had not been recognized as righteous among the nations. Henry and I had been there not even for a day. However, our mother and our aunt Esther Hein, our sister and our cousin Annie had been sheltered by the de Virieux for several months at the risk of their lives and the lives of their children. We did not know if the de Virieux would be interested in being recognized as righteous. We contacted the son of the Marquis, le Comte Wilfrid de Virieu, a man of my age, and told him what we wanted to do. Over the phone, he told me, j'attendais que mes parents soient reconnus comme justes. I was waiting for my parents to be recognized as righteous individuals. We applied to Yad Vashem, and after rigorous documentation, the de Virieux were found to be worthy of the honor. It was, and of note is that if you are an honoree of and receive the award of Righteous Among the Nations, you may pick the venue where this occurs. The de Virieux decided to have the ceremony at the chateau where my mother had been hidden. And it was a glorious event. There were 18 Schanzers, 54 de Virieux. There were dignitaries and hundreds of guests. The ceremony took place in the courtyard of the chateau. They had placed a large flag of Israel on the wall, and as usual, there were speeches, and 3 of the 5 of the surviving children of de Virieux were there, and they received the certificate of Righteous Among the Nations. Also present were some of our grandchildren, and here between Henry and me is Riri Passeron, the little guy whose hand we were holding with the goat, and in between Henry and his grandson Avi is Nadine Passeron, who had come with Tatan Jeannot in 1980. This was an appropriate recognition of what righteous people had done. And the de Virieux were very proud of what their ancestors had done. They had participated in our being saved and our worlds being saved. And this is a picture of Henry and me with the 3 de Virieux under the same arch which we had taken in 1943. We went back there in September, and in the castle, and if you're ever in France, you may go by there and see it. Now, a few days before our visit to France, Henry had contacted the mayor of the town in Saint-Pal-de-Mont, where we had been hidden with Lamemé during World War II. The mayor asked Henry that if we were in France, to come by and see, if not for our sake, for the sake of the townspeople. Henry.
So we arrived at the town square, a busload of Schanzers, and we were met by a large enthusiastic group of villagers who escorted us for the mile walk from the town square to the little farm where we had lived with Lamemé. After touring the house, which now has indoor plumbing, the mayor asked us to walk to the side of the house and, to our amazement, unveiled a plaque which reads, I'll translate it. Here were sheltered by Adolphine Dorel, the children Bernard and Henry Schanzer during the Second World War. When I saw that plaque, Bernie and I both were in tears. Anyway, the mayor of the village then proceeded to walk us back to the school where we had learned not to talk out of turn, and to the town cemetery where a moving ceremony took place. It included laying down a wreath and speeches by various dignitaries. But to me, the most touching moment occurred when one of the dignitaries asked for forgiveness for the crimes committed by the Germans and their French collaborators against the Jews. It was an unforgettable moment, fitting for an unforgettable day.
Some final thoughts. First, and as Thomas Cahill in his book, The Gift of the Jews, points out, the sublime gifts of the Jews to civilization, a universal tenet of Judaism, which I hold dear, as expressed by the great sage Rabbi Akiva, is in Hebrew, Chaviv Adam shenivra b'tzelem. Precious is man, for he was created in God's image. This speaks to the dignity and the divinity of man. This includes each one of us. You may look to the right, you may look to the left, and when you get home, you may look in the mirror. This core value is at the foundation of the Declaration of Independence of the United States, that all men are created equal. It is at the core of our great democratic republic. 2, we must maintain and support the independent, the democratic state of Israel and make sure that its boundaries, safety, and survival are ensured. 3, 86 years ago, we were engulfed in a pandemic of evil and indifference to evil. There was rabid anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism remains viral and virulent. To repeat, during World War II, 6 million Jews, including 1.5 million children, and our father was murdered. 2/3 of European Jewry was wiped out. There was a genocide. there was a Holocaust. Ordinary men became mass murderers. Now there's a call for action. We, ordinary men, we must emulate Tatanjano, Lamémé, the Marquis and the Marquise de Virieu, the righteous among the nations. We must have the same moral compass. These noble individuals risk their lives not once, but continually to save us. But for them, we would not be here. We've told you our story, now it's yours. Your presence here proves that you are not indifferent. Your presence here is a gift to us, for it represents hope. In that sense, we are allies. We have said never again, but it has to become a reality. We have to make sure that it never happens again. Thank you.
Take a few questions.
Yes.
Okay. So, thank you very much to the Schanzers. We have time for a few questions, if anyone has, and to clarify anything they said or about this story. Obviously, they only gave you chapter headings, as we say.
Okay, so for the first 30 years that we survived the war, we did not discuss it. My mother never looked back, and I think just if we had discussed and dwelt on what had happened, it would have stifled our development because we would have lived in the past. And in this respect, my mother, I think very wisely, felt that dwelling on the past was not going to solve our problems. We had to look to the future. I think with time, the pain decreased and the requirement to teach the evil that happened and to awake a certain awareness of the possibility and to make sure that it will never happen again dawned on us. And I think at that point, we really started to discuss it.
Other We always have different opinions, but
Yeah.
Gentlemen, what would you say?
if somebody tells you 1 + 1 is 3, what do you tell him? Right? It's somebody says you got what you deserve. It's you can discuss it, but when if the Earth is flat, it's flat. Interestingly, by the way, we still don't know that our father died. So he never died. No. But there is something we did not go into, but we thought that he had gone from Saint Etienne, Venisieux, Drancy, Auschwitz, and had been killed. An amazing phenomenon is that, can we just extend a little bit, Dr. Shapiro? Amazingly, we have a postcard from his mother, who was in the Krakow ghetto. Now I've got you guys all confused, right? Okay. There's a postcard from his.
But by the way, dated correctly. There's a postcard dated January 1943. Okay, from my father's mother in Krakow,
Wait.
Poland.
Wait.
And the postcard was sent to my mother, and it's an amazing postcard. Go ahead, you can.
By the way, to make a slight correction, it was sent to Dr. Fargier, the in-between. We had mentioned it. This was sent by our grandmother, Charlotte, Bruno's mother, in January of 1943, saying that Bruno is nearby and he wants to know what's happening with his family. So that he obviously was not murdered in Auschwitz at that time. He was someplace, he never wrote, so, and when we tried to find out, and for example, Jackie's parents, Boris and Frieda Shapiro, our uncles and aunts, were murdered, and there is documentation by the Red Cross that they were murdered in Auschwitz. About our father, we don't have that document. So he's probably running around someplace.
There were many people who were forced to write postcards. The Germans were forcing people to write.
But
Correct. By the way, if I may,
Yes.
yes, what seems to make sense. My father was 39 years old. His brother was 37 years old. A third uncle was 42 years old. They were able-bodied men. When they got to Auschwitz, they were not sent to the death chambers immediately. They were probably sent on to a labor battalion, and they managed to stay alive for maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 months. At the end of that period of time, they were either killed or they died from the unhuman or inhuman conditions that they were subjected to. Very, very few people who were deported in 1942 or 1943 and were sent to the death camp managed to survive. The only few people we know is like our uncle Siegfried, who somehow did manage to survive Auschwitz for 3 years.
Okay. Dr. Shapiro, this is the postcard sent by our grandmother to Dr. Fargier,
Yeah.
which is an amazing document.
Very near Auschwitz, by the way, if you don't know, Krakow. Okay, one final question, if we have? Yes. Plaque.
Or like,
But the people who received...
What's the question?
The plaque that they put up in, how did it feel? To see the
I'm
plaque?
sorry?
The plaque in 2000, the one you showed at the end. You wanted to
Oh,
the
in
plaque.
Czech.
Yeah.
What's the question?
How did it feel? How did you feel?
I'll repeat. We were walking around the little farmhouse, and the mayor comes over to Bernie and me and says, there is an unveiling. I didn't even know the French word for unveiling, so I don't know what's happening. But then he marched us around, and you can go over, show the slide again. And then they had a towel or drape over the sign. They took it down, and when I saw it, I just started crying. I mean, it was incredible that these people, the goodwill that was exhibited by these people towards us, and the pride that these now in this little town, these are farmers. It's not the nobility and the big shots that we had seen at the castle. I mean, these are nice, plain French people who recognized and were proud that one of theirs had done what this woman had done. And I want to have the last word. I'll tell you something. La Mémé, the grandmother with whom we lived, she was, in Hebrew we say tzedekis, in our language, in English, you say she was a saint. She was an absolute saint. And I'll end up by, there's a Jewish tradition that names have significance. And Madame Bonhomme, for those of you who know a little French, Bonhomme is good man, and she deserved that name. And the grandmother, La Mémé, her name was Dorel, and Dorel is of gold, and she was indeed golden. So if you remember, the daughter was great, and the mother was absolute gold.
Thank you very much.
Good name.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you all for coming. Thank you very much for the Schanzers. We will have one more event this semester, Judaic Studies, April 26th, I think. You'll get it, texts, you'll get the emails, and I'll be hanging up. Okay, thank you all for coming.
Okay.
People, very nice. Okay, yeah.